Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Shevuot daf Yud Daled. We are near the bottom of Yud Gimel and Mabet. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Oh no, that's not it. Here it is. So yesterday we learned about the disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon regarding the purpose of various sacrifices on Yom Kippur. Everybody agrees with respect to, or at least the two of them agree with respect to that the two Irim, the one that is offered on the outer altar, along with the Sir La Hashem, which is paired with the Sir LaAzazel, that those two he goats, they atone for tuma of the mikdash and its holy items, and in two different situations. The outer one addresses situations where you weren't even aware that you connected to Tameh, and then you went into the mikdash, and then after you were in the mikdash or after you left the mikdash, you become aware that you were now connected to Tameh. And so that's a situation where, although in other sins, so for example, if I were to eat a piece of meat and then you tell me afterwards that that piece of meat was not kosher and I didn't know it when I ate it, I would still be obligated to offer a sin offering, a chatas offering. When it comes to the mikdash, the only time I'm obligated to offer a korban olav yored is if I knew I was tameh, I forgot I was tameh, and then then either went into the mikdash or ate kodesh, and then I remembered again that I was tameh, or in connection, I knew I was tameh, but I didn't realize, according to some opinions, that I went that I was going into the mikdash or that I was eating kodesh. So, but the point is you needed to have knowledge at the beginning and knowledge at the end. So when you don't have that, so then the korbanot on Yom Kippur will atone for us. So when you don't know in the beginning and only learn at the end, so then the outer seir will provide atonement for the Jewish, for the Yisraelim. And when you know at the beginning, but you don't know now, and you haven't yet discovered. Now, when you eventually discover, you'll still have to offer the korban olav yored. But until you discover, during this moment when you've done the sin inadvertently, but you aren't yet aware that you've done so, so then the inner seir will atone for that. And Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon agree with that. But when it comes to the bull and the Sir LaAzazel, there they disagree. So when it comes to the Rabbi Yehuda, he says the bull is only for Tuma of the Mikdash and its holy items and just for the Kohanim. And the Sir LaAzazel deals with every other sin, both for the Kohanim and for the Israelim. Whereas Rabbi Shimon distinguishes. He says, no, the Seir LaAzazel, yes, it atones for all the other sins, but it's only for the Israelim, because the Kohanim have all of their sins atoned for through the bull. And so as a result, we end up with this debate. So once we had that debate yesterday, we quoted a Baraisa that said that the Kohanim receive atonement through the bull offered by the Kohen Gadol and not the Seir LaAzazel. So that convinced Rava that the author of that Baraisa must be Rabbi Shimon and not Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that Kohanim do not get do not get atonement through. I'm sorry, because Rabbi Yehuda says that Kohanim do get atonement through the Seir LaAzazel. So I had it right. The point is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Kohanim get their atonement for other sins through the Seir LaAzazel. And so, given the fact that that the Baraisa said that the Kohanim were not getting their atonement through the Seir LaAzazel, so then it makes more sense to say that it is Rabbi Shimon and not Rabbi Yehuda. So, but as we pick up at the end of the fourth line from the bottom of Yud Gimel and Mabet, Abaye isn't so sure. Abaye thinks, you know what? Abaye Amar, Afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda. It could even be Rabbi Yehuda. And Hachikamer. This is what the Brisa is trying to say. So he's going to basically reread the Brisa and limit the Brisa to talking about Tuma of holy things. Because when you talk about Tuma of holy things, it is true that the Sir Azazel is not the method of atonement for Kohanim, because the method of atonement for Kohanim is the bull. And so he's going to reread the Brisa as we're going to see right now. Hachikamer, this is what the Brisa is saying. Me'ata ein lahem kapara tumas mikdash v'kodashav. I might have thought that the Kohanim do not get atonement for causing tuma of the Beis Hamikdash and the holy things there. Kishahu omer yechaper ala Kohanim. So when the Torah says in Vayikra Perek Tes Zayin Pasuk Lamed Gimel, and we saw in this past week's parsha, so then it says that he's going to bring atonement. We're talking about the Kohanim. So Matzinu Sheyesh Lahen Kapara. So we see that they do get some kind of atonement. So how do they get atonement? Bishar Averos. When it comes to other kinds of sins, they're going to get some kind of atonement. And just as they receive atonement for other sins, which they receive according to Rabbi Yehuda through the Seir LaAzazel, because the Seir LaAzazel, according to Rabbi Yehuda, does every other sin, both for Kohanim and Yisraelim. King Yesh Lehen Kapara, so too they get some kind of kapara. But as we turn to Yudal Manal, Bitumas Mikdash, when it comes to the Tuma of the Beis Hamikdash, V'Kodashav, and its holy vessels. So B'Mahem Kaprim. So what is their method of getting atonement? So now there are a couple of possibilities. It could be that they get their atonement through the bull, because the bull is the Kohen Gadol's sacrifice. It could be that they get their atonement through the Seir LaAzazel. So those are a couple of possibilities. So which way is it? So mutav sheis kapru b'paro shel Aaron. Well, the best answer is to say that they must get kapara through the bull of Aaron. Shahare huter miklalo etzel beito. Because although we have a statement in connection with that bull that it says Asher Lo, indeed we're going to see that it says Asher Lo 3 separate times in the Torah, and we're going to use each of them to teach us something or to highlight a point. But I might have thought, because it says Asher Lo, that this bull belongs to Aaron, namely the Kohen Gadol, that it would only be for Aaron. But it also says, the Torah specifically says that that bull atones for Aaron and B'chol Beito, is his household. And so we know that his household must be included. So once we're going to include something that isn't him, namely his household, so then we should also include the rest of Kohanim. And we should not use as the method of atonement the seir the bull the he-goat that was done, the inner he-goat. Now the inner he-goat, as we see over here, the inner he-goat atones for Tuma of the Mikdash and its holy items for Yisraelim when they're aware initially, and then they're not aware. Now, I might have thought that same thing could happen for that it could also cover the bulls, cover the Kohanim. So Shaharei Lo Hutar Miklalo, because in connection with the inner Seir, it says Asher La'am. That's in Vayikra Perek Tezayin Pasuk Tezvav. And so that inner Seir, when it says Asher La'am, it belongs to the congregation, namely the congregation and not the Kohanim. So as a result, and we don't have any exceptions. The Torah never tells us an exception to that categorization. And so as a result, it makes more sense to add somebody where we already have an exception than to make a new exception. The im nafshach lamar, and then the Brisa continues and notes, and if that's not enough for you, then you could say the following: Harei hu omer. It says in Tehillim, Beis Aaron Baruch es Hashem, that the house of Aaron blesses Hashem. And who is that Beis Aaron referring to? Well, nowhere else in those two psukim at the end of Tehillim Kuf Lamed Hey does it reference Kohanim. It references Yisraelim, it references Leviim, and then it references Beis Aaron. So clearly Beis Aaron must be the Kohanim. And so as a result, we see that it must be the Kohanim. So umay im nafshecha lomar. 1 second. Why do we need this additional point of if you want, you can say? So, if you want to say something additional. V'chi tema, the reason is, v'chi tema beso ksiv, maybe I might think that the house, it says that his house, so kululan kuriyam beso. And so so since it says that his house, and I might have thought his house means literally just his household and not all of Kohanim. So as a result, I'm going to tell you that in fact his household must mean all of the Kohanim. Shnei amar Beis Aaron Baruch Hu es Hashem Yirei Hashem Baruch Hu es Hashem. So the bottom line is that we see that the Beis Aaron specifically refers to all Kohanim. Okay, so now v'hai asher la'am lahachi hada'asa. 1 second, you're telling me that the words asher la'am are coming to tell us that the seir, the inner seir that is brought on Yom Kippur, that it is only supposed to be an atonement for the Yisraelim and not for the Kohanim. But there's something else that we use those words for. Hamibai lai dika amar rachmana mid'am lahavi hahu. That lahavi. That we when it comes to those words, we derive that this is how we know that it needs to be funded from the Jewish people. As Rashi says, lahachi hu da'asa shelo yiskapru bo kohanim. Are you telling me that it this is now 1, 2, 3, 5 lines down in the Rashi, in the narrow lines on Yudalet Amud Aleph? Are you telling me that the words Asher La'am tells us that Shelo Yiskapru Bo HaKohanim, that the Kohanim do not get a kapara with the inner offering, with the inner seir? Mid'am lahavi, as connects Rashi. Mishel tzibur, you need to use the money of the community. V'lo Mishel Kohen Gadol, and you don't use the money of the Kohen Gadol. Lefisha hapar ba Mishelo, it is the bull that comes from the Kohen Gadol. Chutzrach lomar b'seir Mishel tzibur, and so we have to say that the seir is coming from the money of the community. So now that we use Asher La'am to tell us that it's the money from the community, how do we have the ability to use it for something else? So the Gemara answers, Hahu me umeis edas b'nei Yisrael nafka. No, it's not really Asher La'am that tells us that it needs to be the community's money. It's umeis edas b'nei Yisrael. It's from the language of from the assembly of the children of Israel. That's how we learn that it needs to be the money of the Jewish people and not the Kohen Gadol or anyone else. So the high asher lo. Well, 1 second. What if you wanted to? We used to also similarly said that the words asher lo. Lahachihu da'asa, that it was also coming to tell us that only the Kohen Gadol would be receiving atonement through the bull. Haimi baile, but we also need that to teach us something else. L'kedetanya, as we have a specific brisa that teaches the following. Mishalohu, from the word shalohu, mevi ve'eno Mishalahu Mevi, that he has to bring it from his own. Ve'eno Mevi Mishel Tzibor, and he does not bring it from the community. So Yachol Lo Yevi Mishel Tzibor She'ein Hatzibor Miskapern Bo. Now maybe the reason that he needs to use his own money is, and he can't use the community's money, is because the community doesn't get any atonement through the bull of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and so maybe that's why he doesn't need to. He can't use their money. But Abal Yevi Mishel Achiv HaKohanim. But maybe he can use the money that belongs to other Kohanim, because Sha'achiv HaKohanim miskaprin bo, because his brothers, the Kohanim, do get atonement through the bull. Talmud Lomar, that's why the Torah says again, Asher Lo. It says it a second time, and indeed it says it 3 times. It says it once in Pasuk, in Perek Ted Zayin Pasuk Vav, and then it says it again twice in Perek Ted Zayin Pasuk Yud Aleph. And so Yachol Lo Yavi V'im Hevi Kosher. So maybe it's only lichatchila that it needs to be his money, but b'diavad, if he used the money of other Kohanim, it would be okay. Talmud Lomar Shuv Asher Lo. So again, a third time it says Asher Lo. So the point is that we have now used Asher Lo. All the Asher Los that exist in these psukim, we've used them for this purpose, to tell us specifically that the Kohen Gadol needs to use his own money. So how can you say that the Kohen Gadol is the only one, that Asher Lo tells us that only the Kohen Gadol gets atonement? So the answer is, Hakosov. The point is, in the end of the brisa says Hakosov Shana Alav La'akev, that the brisa concludes that the Torah is repeating it again to tell us that it's mandatory. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with the fact that Asher Lo teaches these lessons from the brisa and not the fact that only the Kohen Gadol should get atonement? So Tanahaki Kakashile. That's the question that effectively was being asked. That and why we needed to, and the way I'm reading it is that this is why we needed to repeat the Gemara's and offer a new answer. So my shna b'da'am delo mechaper. What's the different? Why is it different in connection with the higot of the chatas of the people that it does not bring atonement for the Kohanim? Why doesn't that inner chatas bring any atonement for the Kohanim? Because they don't contribute to it. Diksiv asher la'am, because it says asher la'am. So b'da aharonami lo chasri be'mamona. So too the Kohanim do not contribute towards its purchase. But ka'amar kulan kruyan beso. And so that's why we then answer that all the people in Aaron's family and all the people of all the Kohanim are called the house of Aaron. So the point is that the Baraisa is telling us that that 1 second, maybe you might think that 1 second, this whole thing doesn't work because Asher La'am tells us that if only when the people pay for it, are they going to get atonement? And so similarly, when it comes to the bull of the Kohen Gadol, since only he pays for it, maybe only he gets atonement. So as a result, that's why we end up using the drasha from Tehillim that his house includes the Kohanim. And so that shows that his house is including the Kohanim. And even though they aren't paying for it, they do get atonement. Okay, so the Torah now references, so again, in the end, we say that this brisa could actually be even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Bishlam el Rabbi Shimon, now we have this debate between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, and regarding the breadth of the atonement in connection with the Seir LaAzazel. The Rabbi Shimon says the Kohanim are not included in the Seir LaAzazel. Rabbi Yehuda says that they are included in the Seir LaAzazel. So now we're going to focus on the following. The Torah references 2 separate confessions with respect to Aaron's bull. One is referenced in Vayikra Tezayin Pasuk Vav, and then again in Vayikra Tezayin Pasuk Yud Aleph. So the Gemara suggests that this makes much more sense for Rabbi Shimon than for Rabbi Yehuda. So Bishlam el Rabbi Shimon, Hainu Diksiv Trei Viduyun Vidam Hapar. So we have 3 different kinds of atonement. We have 2 confessions and the sprinkling of blood, all of the bull. Chad keneged se'ir hana, and all of them are done for the bull. So the question is what are they covering? So chad keneged se'ir hanase b'fnim, one of them corresponds to the he-goat atonement, the inner he-goat that is going to atone only for the Yisraelim. And so as a result, that's one. And again, if we go back to the top where I have the what they atone for, the inner seir atones for where you were aware at the beginning that you were tamei, and now you're not aware that you were tamei, and you don't have that final awareness that would trigger a korban olav yored. And so you still need atonement because you did something wrong, but you don't even know that you did something wrong because you forgot that you were tamei when you went into the Beis Hamikdash, and you haven't yet remembered that you were tamei. So v'chad keneged seir anaseh b'chutz, and then we also need an atonement for the Kohanim with respect to the outer seir, because that outer seir addresses situations where you're not aware that you were a tamei in the beginning, and then you ate something that was kodesh, or you went into the Beis Hamikdash, and now you became aware. Because we've seen that when it comes to the korban olav yored, you need to have been aware of the tuma in the very beginning, and then become not aware. But if for example, you just walked over a piece of land and didn't know at that time that it was a graveyard, and then you go into the Beis Hamikdash, and then only after that you're informed that you walked over a graveyard. So you're not chayav a korban olav yored because you didn't have the initial knowledge, but you are going to get atonement from the outer seir, from the on Yom Kippur. V'chad keneged seir hamishtalech. And then there's the atonement when it comes to the he-goat that's sent away. That, again, according to Rabbi Shimon, that atones for all other sins. So the idea is that when it comes to Rabbi Shimon, we have three different kinds of atonement. We have two confessions, and we have the sprinkling of the blood. And they all happen on the bull because the bull is corresponding to the other three korbanot on the screen, the seir la'azazel, the outer seir, and the inner seir for the Yisraelim. And so it all works out so beautifully. But Rabbi Yehuda, but according to Rabbi Yehuda, he says that the seir la'azazel works for both the Kohanim and the Yisraelim. So why does the bull need three different things? Two confessions and a sprinkling. It's only covering two situations, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So why do you need three? Trei v'yiduyin v'dama par lamali. Why do you need three? B'chad v'yidui v'dama sagya. It should be enough to have one atonement, one confession, and one sprinkling of the blood. So the answer is echad lo ve'echad lebeso. No, the Rabbi Yehuda says that the two different confessions, one is specifically for the Kohen Gadol, and then the second one is for all of the Kohanim. And so, yes, it's only dealing with two other sins, two other situations, and it's covering two other korbanot, but one, the confession that relates to the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol, that's happening twice, one specifically for the Kohen Gadol, and then for the other Kohanim. And Kedetana debei Rabbi Yishmael. And this all fits very nicely like a teaching of the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Kach hi midas hadin no heges. This is how the principle of justice works. Mutav yavo zakai v'yichaper al hachayev v'al yavo chayev v'yichaper al hachayev. That it's better for somebody who's innocent to pray on behalf of the one who's guilty than somebody who's guilty. And so the Kohen Gadol makes himself innocent by first confessing his own sins on the animal, and then he can confess the sins for the rest of the Kohanim because now he's not guilty any longer. And so that is the way we can understand the situation. And so in fact, it makes sense both according to Rabbi Shimon and according to Rabbi Yehuda to have two confessions and one sprinkling. So Hadron Alach Shavuos has Shtayim, Hadron Alach Shavuos Shtayim, Hadron Alach Shavuos Shtayim. So we are not yet done with this discussion of Tuma and the knowledge of it. In fact, we're now going to take, in some levels, a deeper dive into exactly what the sin is. So let's take a look as we open the second chapter of Shevuos. Yedius Hatuma Shtayim Shehin Arba, as we saw in our opening Mishnah, that the awareness of Tuma is two that are four. Now again, as we saw in the opening Mishnah, there are two situations that we could deal with. We can have I didn't know that so I knew that I was Tameh because we always need knowledge in the beginning. Then I forgot I was Tameh, and either I went into the Mikdash or I ate holy items. Okay, and then I remembered again that I was Tameh. So as a result, that's two. The other way is, instead of the uncertainty or the lack of knowledge or the forgetfulness being about my own personal tuma status, the forgetfulness is about the location or the thing that I'm eating. So again, I know that I'm tameh, but now, and I knew that this was Kodesh, or I knew that this was the Beis Hamikdash, but I forgot. I forgot that it was the Kodesh or the Beis Hamikdash, and so I ate it. And then I remembered that it was. So those are two more cases, and that's a total of four cases. So now we're going to see those in detail inside. So nitma v'yada, a person became tameh and knew he was a tameh. V'nelma, and then he forgot. Mimena hatuma, and he forgot it. V'zachor es hakodesh, and then afterwards he ate the holy thing, and then he remembered that he was eating holy things while he was tameh. Or that was item number one. Nela mimena hakodesh v'zachor es hatuma. Or he forgot, he still knew that he was tameh. He just forgot that this item was kodesh. Or nelma mimenu zebezeh. Or you forgot both the fact that he was kodesh, that he was tameh, and he forgot the fact that this was kodesh. So that is three, but basically the third of those items where he forgot both is really just a combination of the first two, so that's not a third category. V'achal as a kodesh below yada, and then he eats the kodesh without realizing the misha'achal yada, and then after he ate it, he then becomes aware again. So harezeh ba'olav yored. So in all three of these situations, he is going to be subject to a korban olav yored, but we're counting this really as just two, because either he forgot about the whole his own tuma nature, or he forgot about the nature of the kodesh of the item that he was eating, and those are the two different things that he could forget. Now, two more. Nitma v'yada v'nelma mimenu tuma. Again, he became tameh and then forgot about it. V'zachor es hamikdash, and then he goes into the Beis Hamikdash. Nela mimenu mikdash v'zachor es hatuma, and then, or he forgot the fact that it was the mikdash, but he knew that he was tameh. Or nela mimenu zebezeh, or he forgot both that he was tameh and he forgot that this was the Beis Hamikdash. V'nichnas lemikdash v'lo yada. Again, he goes into the Beis Hamikdash and he did not remember. So umishiyatza yada, and then he remembers after he exits. Harezeh ba'olav v'yored. So again, that's two more. That's going to be four, and so therefore we have a korban olav v'yored. So echad hanichnas l'azara. So what does it mean to go in? So now we're going to go again. The Mishnah is continuing to highlight what it means to go into the Beis Hamikdash. So it doesn't make a difference whether you go into the courtyard, or you go into additional space that's been added to the courtyard. Now, how do we add additional space? So now essentially in an aside, the Mishnah adds she'ein mosivin al ha'ir ba'al ha'azaro, because we can only add to the city of Yerushalayim and to its courtyards. Ela b'melech, we have to use a king. V'navi, you need a prophet. V'urim v'tumim, you need the urim v'tumim to guide us. V'sanhedrin, and you need the Sanhedrin. It's not clear whether it means all four or each individually, but in any event, the point is that we need those items, and specifically the Sanhedrin shel shivim ve'echad. We're dealing with the Sanhedrin of 71. That's the Sanhedrin in the Beit Hamikdash, or yes, ubishtei todot ubishir, and you need 2 Toda offerings, and you need song. Ubeitin mahalchin ushtei todot acharehen, and at least at the moment it seems that the Beis Din goes, and then after them the 2 Todot go. We'll actually see in the Gemara, I think, that the order is reversed, but that's for tomorrow. V'chol Yisrael achareihem, and then all the Jewish people are traveling behind them. And then, as we turn to Yudalim Mabed, hapenimit nechelet, the inner loaf gets eaten. V'achitzona nisrefet. The outer loaf is we're going to see that you just take 2 loaves from the 2 todos. And that's what's going to, because the toda is an offering that includes 40 loaves of bread, but you don't, we're going to just take 2 of them to do this walking around. And so that's, the outer one is going to get burned. The kol shelo nases b'chol elu, and anytime you make an addition to Yerushalayim or to the courtyard, and you don't do all these details, if you go into there while you're tameh, you're not liable because you haven't actually done the process necessary to sanctify it. So, nitma ba'azara, what happens if you become tameh while you are in the courtyard? So a rat dies, crawls onto your lap and die. Oh, you can't be sitting, so we'll say, crawls on your foot and dies. Nelma mimena tuma. So if you the tuma, and then you forgot that you were tameh, v'zachor es hamikdash, but you knew you were in the Beis Hamikdash. Nela mimena mikdash v'zachor tuma, or you forgot you were in the Beis Hamikdash, but you knew you were tameh. Or you forgot both the fact that you were in the Beis Hamikdash and that you were tameh because it was such a traumatic moment that the rat died on your foot. The hishtachava, and now you bow down. Oh, shishah b'kadei hishtachava, or you stay in the Beis Hamikdash long enough to bow down. Oh, balo ba'aruka, or you go out of the Beis Hamikdash using the long route, as Rashi says. O sheba lo ba'aruka, sheyatza lo derech aruka. You go out of the Beis Hamikdash using a long path. Sheyesh katsara hemena lotzes. There was a shorter path that you could have taken. You don't take the closest exit. You take the farther exit. So then chayav. In all of those situations, you would be liable to a korban ola v'yored. Okay, because of course you didn't do it on purpose. You weren't, when you went into the Beis Hamikdash, you weren't tameh in the first place. You only became tameh when you were in the Beis Hamikdash. So b'kitzara, but if you leave the fastest way possible, so then patur, then you are exempt. So Zuhi mitzvahs aseh. So once we talked about this particular case of the positive commandment of having to leave the Beis Hamikdash the fastest way possible, we now say something else about this particular case. Zohi mitzvahs aseh shebemikdash she'ein chayavin aleha. This is the situation where there is no obligation associated with it. Now, what is it that is there's no obligation? Zohi, again, Rashi now, oh, and by the way, I should note the Rashi third line down in the narrow lines, because Sarah Patur, that if you take the fastest way, you're going to be exempt. Heika delo hishtachava v'lo shah. The key is, of course, you also have to not have bowed down and not waited. You needed to go out of the place immediately. Now, you don't have to run. It doesn't say anything about running. You don't have to, it's not the time that it takes, it's the route that you take. So Zohi, Rashi continuing now, fourth line down in the narrow lines on Yudal and Bed, Tuma she'ira lo b'toch azara. This category of Tuma that happens to him while he's in the Azara, Zohi mitzvahs us, again continuing in the next next Rashi, Zoe mitzvahs ase shebemikdash tiyeshkan mitzvahs ase v'yishlechu min hamachaneh, right? That you send them out from the camp. B'chol tamei lenefesh. Again, this is from Bamidbar. She'ein chayevin aleha. So again, continuing on in Rashi, based in that if the Sanhedrin were to make a mistake in connection with the teaching of this law, and say, for example, that a particular situation does not require somebody to leave the Beis Hamikdash, when in fact it does. Par b'hora'ah. So then they would have to offer a bull sin offering for its false teaching. This is the topic covered in Horayos, that sometimes there are teachings that if we teach in certain situations and the public sins as a result, the Beis Din needs to offer a public sin offering that indicates that to atone for that sin. Below Kohen Mashiach did the Mefarish B'Gemara, and similarly the Kohen Gadol, as we'll explain in the Gemara, also, if he were to opine for himself that in fact he does not need to leave the Beis Hamikdash, because even though this animal is considered tamei, died on his foot, and so as a result, he stays in the Beis Hamikdash and he teaches himself wrong. So this is not a situation where he would offer a special sin offering, even though ordinarily you would offer that special sin offering. So now, having referenced this situation where they aren't liable, what's the teaching where you would be liable? Meaning, what's an example of something happening while you're inside, and then you need to leave, and there's and now the Kohen Gadol or the Sanhedrin teaches the law in an incorrect way. What's the situation where you would have to deal with that? Haya mishamesh im hatahora. If they were to teach regarding a person engaged in intercourse with a woman who is tahor, v'amra, and she says lo, and v'amra lo, and she says to the person with whom she's having relations, nitmesi, during the course of the intercourse, that she's become tamei, she feels a flow indicating that she is now a nida, uferish miyad, and he withdraws immediately, meaning that while he is still in an erect situation, chayav, in that situation, he is liable, because because he receives some benefit from the fact of the good feeling, when he leaves. What is he supposed to do? So what he's supposed to do is he's supposed to stop where he is, wait until his member is no longer erect, and then withdraw. And if he does that, so then he would not be liable. But the point is that if the Kohen Gadol or the Sanhedrin teach incorrectly in connection with this similar sin of needing to exit, that would be a case where they would be liable for the special chatas offering of a bull, and unlike the case of exiting the mikdash. Okay, so all of this seems to make clear that according to everyone that we've seen so far, the Tanakama in our Mishnah, there are 4 situations of liability for an Olav Yored. You know that you are Tameh, you forget that you're Tameh, and you eat Kodesh or enter the Beis Hamikdash, and then you remember. Or you know that you're tamei, you forget that something is the mikdash, you forget that something is kodesh, and you eat it or enter, and then you remember again. So those are the 4 situations. But not everybody agrees with that. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Hasheretz v'ne'ela mimena, that the Torah says, this is a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Hey pasuk Bet. So it says that when it comes to a sheretz, and it was concealed from him. So what does it teach? Al ha'elem sheretz chayev, ve'eino chayev al ha'elem mikdash. No, you are only liable for forgetting that you are tamei. You are not liable for a korban olav yored if you forget that this is the Beis Hamikdash or that this item is Kodesh. And so as a result, Rabbi Eliezer disagrees with the learning of our Tanakama that applies it in both directions. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says he's got a different view. The Ne'elami Menavu Tameh. He says that it was concealed from him and he was Tameh. So Al Ha'elam Tum'ah Chayav, Ve'enu Chayav Al Ha'elam Mikdash. That sounds exactly to be like what Rabbi Eliezer says. And it sounds, again, like Rabbi Eliezer, but so the Gemara is going to explain the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. And then we have a third view, Rabbi Yishmael Omer, as Rashi says, Rabbi Akiva Omer, the Gemara Mefarish, my Benai. What's the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Yishmael Omer, third view, other than that is different from our Tanakama, V'ne'elam shtei pamim. it refers to two separate concealments. So l'chayav halem tuma v'halem mikdash. It doesn't make a difference whether you forget that you're tameh or that you forget that about the mikdash or the kodesh. The bottom line is that you're obligated in both ways. Well, what's the difference between that and the Tanakama? Because that sounds very much like the Tanakama. Again, there are 4 situations for which you'd be liable. The answer is that in this, according to Rabbi Yishmael, as we will see at the end of the day today's daf, that in fact Rabbi Yishmael says you're liable even if you never knew initially that you were tameh. So again, that's the big difference between Rabbi Yishmael and our Tanakama. The Tanakama says you have to have known. Unlike every other sin, you have to have known that you were tameh and then forget about it, and then or forget about the mikdash or the kodesh, and only then will you be subject to a korban olav yored. So Amar of Papa Abaye. So the Gemara now asks, we shtayim shein arba. You say that there are 2 that are 4. Shtayim shein sheish havyam. There seem to be 6 because listen to the knowledges that we're talking about. There's yediyas hatuma tchila v'sof. You have to know what you initially know that you're tameh, then you forget, and then you know. So that's 2 in connection with your tuma. And then there's Yediyas HaKodesh, Tchila V'sof. And then there's a situation where you knew that it was Kodesh food, you forgot that it was Kodesh food, and you ate it while tameh, and then you knew again at the end that it was Kodesh food again. That's 2 more knowledges. That's 4. And then Yediyos Mikdash Tchila V'sof. And then there's the knowledge of the fact that it was the Beis HaMikdash. You knew it was the Beis HaMikdash. Then you forgot that it was the Beis HaMikdash, and you went into it while tameh. And then you remembered. So that's a total of 6. Well, 1 second. According to your reasoning, maybe you should say that there are 8. Maybe we should distinguish between when you know that you're tameh and you then go into the Beis HaMikdash after forgetting, and then know at the end. So that's 2. And we should distinguish between when you know that you're tameh, you forget, and you eat the kodesh, and then you remember again. So that's another 2. So maybe there should be 8, and that the 2 that we originally had in connection with the awareness of the tuma is really 4, because you have the awareness of the tuma in the case of the mikdash, and you have the awareness of the tuma in the case of the kodesh, so of the holy foods. So no, halo kasha, shame tuma achasi. No, we could say that that's actually all covered. It's the same name, meaning that it's all talking about tuma, remembering the tuma and forgetting the tuma, and then remembering again. So that's just 2. Don't count it as 4. Mikol makom shishavim. But 1 second, we still have 6. So we still have a problem. So Amar of Papa, La'olam Tmnanei Havyan. No, you know what? Go back and say that there are in fact 8. Let's deal with both the Mikdash and the Kodesh situations separately. And you know what? Arba Kamaisa, Delo Maisan Leilidei Korban. We can ignore the knowledge at the very beginning, because the 4 Yedios that really matter, that are going to trigger our obligation to offer the Korban Olav Yored, is when, after we ate the Kodesh or after we entered the Mikdash, we remembered that we were Tameh, or we remembered that this was the Kodesh or the Mikdash. So those are 4 situations of remembering that are triggering the offering. And so that's what we mean by 2 that are 4. So lo kachashiv arba basraisa, and we're not going to count. I'm sorry. So it should be delo ma'izid lidei korban lo kamachashiv. So those first 4 we're not going to count, and then arba basraisa demaisan lidei korban kachashiv, and the last 4, which trigger the obligation to offer the sacrifice, those we are going to count. The Ikada Amri, there's another way we could think about it. And there's another way that another tradition that we had, that Rav Papa didn't say that it was the 4 second remembrances that are triggering the korban, but rather Amar Rav Papa la'olam tmane havyan. Really, there are 8. But arba kamaisi delisnahu b'chol Torah kula. Now, it's the first 4 that are not counted in the rest of the Torah kachashiv, because again, in the rest of the Torah, when you, if I eat a piece of chalev and I didn't know it was chalev, I never knew that it was chalev, and then I am told, oh, you ate a piece of chalev, well, then I'm going to be obligated to offer a sin offering, even though I never knew at the beginning. It is only in connection with the Tuma of the Beis Hamikdash that you have to have known, at least according to the Tanakama and not according to Rabbi Yishmael, as we saw a few moments ago, that according to the Tanakh, you have to have known at the very beginning that you were tummy. So that's what makes these Korban Ola V'Yored unique, is that you need to have that initial knowledge. And so that's the ones that account. Arba basraisa to isnu b'kol Torah kula lo kachashav. But when it comes to knowing at the end, that's how you're subject to any sin offering. The way you're always in a general situation that you're subject to a sin offering, you forget and you remember. You don't need to have the initial knowledge. You just have to not know and then know. And so as a result, the knowing at the end isn't anything special about the Korban Ola V'Yored. That's by every kind of sin offering. So that's the explanation, and that's how we get to 4 situations. And again, the core 2 are where you forget about your own tuma, and the added 2 are where you forget about either the Kodesh item or the Mikdash. Okay, so by Rav Papa now asks another question. Nelma mimenu hilchas tuma mahu. What's the story if instead of forgetting about the fact that you became tamei, what you didn't have originally is a knowledge of the hilchos of tuma? So Hechidami, what's the case? If the thing that you don't know is whether a kind of creepy crawly thing is tamei or whether a frog is tamei, zil krei ravhu. That's something that you could go to any school child and he'll tell you. That's really quite remarkable because, of course, I don't even know, which ones are tamei and which are not. But that obviously in those days, they did know because they were more careful about Tuma and Tara. So as a result, it can't be that that's the case of uncertainty. So la'olam the yada betuma sheretz. Now, you know what kind of animal it is, and you know whether or not that kind of animal could cause tuma. But kagon dinaga v'ka'adasha. No, but it's the situation where only a size of a lentil touches you. V'lo yada ka'adasha imitame ilomatame. Is that the sufficient size, or do you need something more to touch you? So what's the law? Kavan de yada mitame sheretz ba'olam yediahi. Do we say that since he knows the general knowledge associated with the sheretz, so that's sufficient knowledge? Odilmo kavan de ka'adasha lo yada imitame ilomatame. But when it comes to the lentil size, he doesn't know. Helamahi. We should consider that a lack of initial awareness. So teku. In the end, we don't answer that question. We leave it unresolved. A second similar inquiry that results in the same answer by Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the following. So we have, if someone, Ben Bavel Sha'ol Eretz Yisrael, somebody from Bavel goes to the land of Israel. He's never been to the land of Israel before. He doesn't know where exactly the Beis HaMikdash is. He doesn't know exactly where the confines of the Beis HaMikdash were located. So Mahu, what's the halacha? Do we say, again, Rashi, Ben Bavel, take a look, top line in the wide lines of Rashi, Yudal and Bet. So, Shiyodea Sheyesh Mikdash B'Yerushalayim, he knew that there was a Beis HaMikdash. Aval Ein Yodea Mikomo, he didn't know his exact location. So, Mahu, what's the halacha? Iki Yediyah B'Tchila, do we say that there is a knowledge at the beginning? Odilma, Haditanan, Nela Mimenu, Mikdash, that when we say that it's then we say that you need to have forgotten the Mikdash, b'misha hikirbo kvar kamar, that you have to have already known its locations. So aliba deman, who are we asking this question to in our Mishnah? Aliba de Rabbi Akiva de Bayadi Betchila. Rabbi Akiva says that you need to have some knowledge at the very beginning, but but he doesn't require a korban ola v'yored when the situation is about not knowing where the mikdash is. So that he's not going to trigger that korban. So there's no question according to him. And Iyaliba de Rabbi Yishmael de Mechayev al Ha'olam Mikdash. And if you're going to talk to me about Rabbi Yishmael, who says that you that you do have a korban olav yored when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, halo ba yediyah betchila. He doesn't need knowledge at the very beginning, unlike the Tanna Kama. So lo tricha d'aliba de Rebbe. Nah, so you gotta say it's according to Rebbe. Rebbe was the Tanna Kama in this Mishnah, effectively. The boy Yediyah B'tchila, who says that you need to have knowledge at the end, in the beginning. Umachayev al ha'olam mikdash, and he says that you're liable in connection with the Beis Hamikdash if you forget that it was the Beis Hamikdash. V'amar Yediyah Beis Rabo Shema Yediyah, and he says that a knowledge that a child would have is sufficient knowledge. So do we say Kevan de Yada de Ika Mikdash Ba'olam Yediyahi? Do we say that since the guy knew that there was a Beis Hamikdash, that's sufficient knowledge? Or Odilma Kevan de Mekomo Yada Le Halmahu he? Or do we say no, because he did not know the location, it's not considered any kind of awareness? And so the Gemara answers Teku. So again, Gemara is not sure. We'll have to wait until Eliyahu comes to get the answer. So that is so now the Gemara is next going to turn to the parts of the Mikdash that would trigger liability if entered into while Tameh. But for that discussion, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.